Everyone ready? All right. Well, I'll go ahead and kick things off. We are excited to have you joining us for the Real Life Virtual Summer Institute. Everyone, welcome to What's Next. My name is Brooke Drennan, and I'll be your session host. I'm here to support the session presenter, who I will introduce shortly, offer technical assistance to participants, as well as share the session evaluation and certificate information at the end of the session. Which is important for a couple of reasons: to give us feedback and also to get credit if you are seeking to do that. So be sure to stick around for that at the end. And please do not hesitate to use the chat to ask questions or request technical support. And at this time, I would like to introduce to you your session presenter, Kristin Zemke, who is a teacher, staff developer, and co-author of Read the World, Rethinking Literacy for Empathy and Action, Amplify Digital Teaching and Learning in the K-6 Classroom, and Connecting Comprehension and Technology.
Thank you so much, Brooke. Hi, everybody. Great to be here with you all. Happy Wednesday. I'm in Chicago today, where it is 82 and sunny, and it's a beautiful day out, but we are still in school. So I am teaching remotely today so that I can be with all of you. So it is a treat for me to hang out. And today we're going to talk a little bit about what's next in teaching and learning, and what we can look forward to as, we take a little breather over summer, then start to spend some time reflecting on what worked and where we want to go next with students. So we've got a lot of opportunity for reflection today. Please use the chat to share your ideas. I think you guys are each other's best resources. When we are able to articulate what went well in our classroom last year, some things we're going to adjust, hopes and dreams for the future, it really contributes to the understanding of everybody. So please use the chat throughout our time today. I'll give you a variety of different reflection breaks, and just let me know what you need. So if you have questions, unmute and interrupt, type them in the chat, and we'll go from there. Before we get too far into our time together today, I just want to share a couple of things with you really quickly here. Let me see if I can share my screen. Great. So this is the little website that I created for our time together here. And if you take a look at this, you'll see that there are a variety of lessons that you can go and investigate a little bit more in the future. There are links to our books, and we're going to be working with this document down here later in our session today. So know that these resources are available even after the 75 minutes ends, or it's also available via the recording. If you click on the resources page, there will be a variety of additional content for you to interact with. And it's loading a little slowly here right now, but here are just some additional resources, readings to explore, things that I'm excited about right now. So know that those are there. And then there's also a page that features some of the social and emotional learning topics that I shared yesterday. So lots of resources that we can come back to after our time together. But without further ado, let's get into it and talk a little bit about what's next. And this is something that I have spent a lot of time thinking about for the last couple of weeks and months. And my work here in Chicago supports teachers and students, not only at my school, but in a network of about 90 schools throughout the Chicagoland area. And then I also have the opportunity to work with schools around the country. And so that has been so helpful in refining my thinking about what's next, and really having conversations, whether it be educators in Oregon or New York or Vermont, and thinking about like where we want to go with students as a next step. So when we think about what's next, and I shared this yesterday if you were with me, but um, just over 13 months ago was the height of the pandemic. And let me just collapse some of this a little bit so you can see everything. April 24th of 2020, 1.4 billion students were out of school or learning remotely. And at this moment in time, the planet had experienced things that we have never experienced before, with this many people isolated at their home and this many students being in their environments that are not familiar. Maybe their home environment, but not their school environment, maybe without support of an adult, maybe with minimized access to food and other resources. And so this is something that changes us. And I feel like we're starting to crawl out of that time of isolation and re-enter some more social experiences. But I think it's important just to take a little time and recognize that whatever our school situation has been this year, it's not just us, right? It's educators around the country as well as around the world. So here in Chicago, we went back to only hybrid learning, socially distant hybrid learning. And within Chicago, many families continue to keep their students remote. And so this is what a typical classroom might look like in Chicago. I reached out to a couple of my friends around the world, and here is what it looks like. Currently, they're still in school as well in British Columbia. Students masked all day and only able to work with one other student as COVID cases have been spiking in the Vancouver area. Here's a photo from my friend's classroom in Beijing, and students there are attending school full time, but fully masked. But I think it was just so representative. If you see this young gentleman in the bottom left corner here, he's trying to explain Lego Mindstorms to his friends. And sometimes, you all know the feeling when you really need to explain something, you just have to pull that mask down to get your message across as you go. And then here's my friend's classroom in Iceland. And Iceland has done a really terrific job of containing COVID. And so they've been back to unmasked regular school for the majority of the school year. So it's just interesting to say, okay, our school looked like this, but also places around the world are dealing with many of the same things that we've been dealing with the last little bit. As more schools have reopened in the country, still by this data is from the end of March, but still by the end of March, the majority of schools in the United States were still under some type of remote or hybrid learning. Just a few places had returned to full in-person learning, and fingers crossed more places will be fully reopened for in-person learning next fall. And I think that's where we, start to think ahead and start to think okay, what will that look like? Will there still be some students or some teachers that are remote? How has learning changed? And I think it's really important for us to say okay, there will be some aspects of teaching and learning that potentially have this return to teaching and learning as we knew it, right? But I think that there are also many things that we're going to innovate on and learn from and hold on to regards to digital, because we see the opportunities and affordances that it gives students. And we're going to spend a little time thinking about that today. So when we talk about what's next, right? I looked online and found a site that was the 200 must use tools for educators. And if you're like me, this image causes me to hyperventilate and to have a panic attack and to be reaching for a paper bag to breathe into. I think this is way too many things, right? And I think like across the course of the last year and a half, so many of us have tried a lot of new tools and tested new things with students. But I feel like right now in this transition time, in this reflection period, we really need to be synthesizing and looking at, okay, what are the tools that we're going to use moving forward? Clearly we don't need all of these. Clearly, not every single one here has a high yield in terms of student learning. But what are those tools that do have a high yield or impact on student learning? And I think, and this is something, as someone who's been working in digital learning for a long time, I think this has been consistent for me, but I'm a firm believer that you can run a fabulously robust digital learning program for students K through 12 with 12, 15, 20 apps, 20 tools, right? What have you. I think you have your big learning management system, whatever that may be, Google Classroom, Schoology, Office 365. And then under that management system, you have maybe 12 tools that you just keep going back to. And when we look to minimize the number of tools, we're selecting tools that can be used in almost any subject, right? We're really looking at things where kids can make something to show what they know, whether it be a video, a sketch, a drawing, a recording, typing to show their thinking, right? We're looking for pieces that have multimodal interaction and varied use. Like many times, and I share this, people ask me like, what's the best fourth grade math website for fact practice or division? And like my response is always like, I don't know what that best site is, because I don't. And I think that instead of just practicing math facts, we're looking for tools where students can manipulate math problems, where they can sketch and provide an extended response. They can speak their think aloud as they're going about and solving it, because that gives us as educators a new window into their understanding and insight. And I think, like there are some tools that like the traditional way still works. Like if you have a student that needs some practice with just math fluency, we could still use index cards and a marker, right? But when we're looking for those quality tools that we want students to interact with on a daily basis, they tend to be those opportunities to create something. And my writing partner, Katie, and I always say, whatever a child makes is the best evidence of what they know and are able to do today. And that informs what we do as a next step, right? That's where we get in that feedback loop of like, here's what Kristen did today. That means tomorrow I'm going to teach her how to do this, and then see how she's able to represent that next step in learning. So be thinking about, like which tools will you hold on to? And how are you rationalizing that decision, right? What's the why? We're going to talk a lot about why today. When we think about what happens next, I hope one of the things that we hold on to and just like adopt right in is this element of student agency. And sometime in the last year and a half, your students have had to demonstrate that agency, that Peter Johnston mindset of I'm the kind of kid who can do things for myself, right? I'm the kind of kid who can log on to a Zoom call and engage in class. I'm the kind of kid who can go into a breakout room and do work with my friends. I'm the kind of kid who can start solving my own problems, right? One silver lining of the pandemic is that our kids have had to be more independent than ever before. And whereas we know that that didn't work for every single child, we know it nudged a lot of them in the direction of independence. And we also know that there are a number of kids that did work for, and that will want to hold on to that independence and that self-direction, regardless of what our school conditions look like next year. So quick little story. I was working with one of the teachers at my school, third grade, and one of the students in his classroom was having a really hard time logging onto Epic. And so he texted me and said, "Hey, can you pop into our reading class tomorrow morning? We need some help with an Epic login." So I popped into the classroom. The teacher put the student and I in a breakout room. And I said to her, I said, "Okay," I said, "Michaela, talk to me. Like, what's your problem with Epic?" And of course, Epic is a free book, free ebook library for students that a lot of schools have used this past year. But she said, "Ms. Z, I am in the middle of this series and I just I have to finish this book. But every time I go into Epic, it keeps telling me my Epic library is not available and to get a parent to help me. But I don't have a parent at home right now, so I can't get to my books." And she was like really frustrated about not being able to finish her reading selection. And I was like, "Oh, like, yay, she's loving reading so much." But I said to her, I said, "Okay," I said, "Michaela, you know what you can do? Why don't you just take a moment, share your screen? Let's see what's going on. Show me." So she shared her screen in the breakout room and then was able to show me like the error message that Epic was giving. And so we poked around a little bit. And as she was sharing, I could see on her Chromebook that it said something like 516, and we were meeting during a morning ELA block. And I said to her, I said, "Michaela, can you click that time right down there and show me the time?" And so she said, "Sure, right here." And I was like, "Yeah." And I said, "Okay, now go into your settings." She's like, "Oh, time and date." She's like, "I know where that is. I went in there the other day." And I said, "Because I think that your Chromebook, Michaela, thinks you're in a different time zone. And maybe that's why it's not letting you log into your Epic library." And she's like, "Oh, so I should change my time zone?" And I said, "Yeah, let's go look at that." So she went into date and time. And then she started to explain her process. And she said to me, "Oh, well, you know what, Ms. Z? I was looking at the date and time the other day, and I saw that my Chromebook was set to Chicago. But then I saw that there was an option for Midway, and I live closer to Midway. So what I did was I changed my Chromebook time setting to Midway." And light bulb moment, I realized, yep, that's what she did. And so I had the opportunity to explain to Michaela and say, like, "Michaela, that was smart thinking, but your Chromebook now thinks that you're in the Pacific Islands of Midway. So it is telling you that it is very, very early in the morning, almost the middle of the night, and that you should be sleeping instead of on your Epic library." And when she heard that, she just said, "Oh, okay, so here's what I need to do. I need to go back and change it to Chicago time. Then I bet you if I save my settings, click refresh, it'll be back." I said, "Why don't you go try that?" Michaela saved her settings, went back to Epic, clicked refresh, and then her book was there. And she said to me on screen, she said, "Bam, Ms. Z, we nailed it. That was it." And so I just had to celebrate like her great thinking and her independence along this process, but B, that she had so many skills, like an 8-year-old having this back end skills to go ahead, change her settings, rechange it when I verbally coached her how to do it, save it, go back to the tool that she was working with, have the knowledge to refresh in order to know that that's where her reading would be, right? So like lots of great learning and problem solving that has come out of our time out of the classroom or our time spent with more devices. Speaking of Epic, I think one of the big things that we have learned in this pandemic time is how ease of access really transforms learning for students. Any type of ebook library or digital library can be a game changer, right? Thinking about Libby or accessing the public library or Destiny with the school library, or even tools like Epic, Reading A to Z, can, for many of our students, increase the number of text that they have access to, right? Students that might have only had 3 books in their home now have access to 60,000 via the internet. And that's a win for kids. It increases the amount of text selection. Many of these ebook libraries have varied features, right? So if you don't know a word, you can tap the word and have it read to you. In some cases, you can have the entire book read to you. In other cases, you can have a video of the book and watch that video and listen and follow along as it goes. We're also seeing increased access to multilingual books, right? Books in Spanish, books in Urdu, books in Japanese, and saying like, okay, this is great for students. Many of these also have different text complexity, right? So we can create collections for students and say, all right, level R readers, hey, I made this library for you about books about our science topic. Go check it out and do your research here. So I think something that I hope that we adopt into our practice is this access piece and increased number of texts for students. And then I think because we've been able to increase the number of devices for students, and in many places, not all, but it's something that I think we're going to continue to work to, gain internet access to students who may not have had it, or to provide hotspots. What we can do as a next step is really think about extended learning. You know, just because the bell rings at 3:30 doesn't mean the learning has to stop. And when we pair that independence piece with extended access, we see students that are able to keep thinking at any time of the day. Here's one of our little second grade students on Seesaw, and we do a lot of reading books at level on Seesaw and recording students reading for Fluency Snapshot. Here she is at home doing the same thing. But I think the important piece, if you zoom in there and look at the time at the bottom right, she's posting this at 6:24 in the evening, right? And so here again, increasing time with text, but also modeling and mirroring some of the learning that we've done in the classroom. And so those are just a number of the practices that I hope we adopt, right? Kind of those things that are no brainer. This is a win for kids. Let's hold on to these, even as we may return a little bit more to a normal school setting. But what I'd like to hear from right now is hear from you. What are some things that you're going to adopt into your practice, whether it be a digital library, increased independence or flexibility for students, extending time? What are some of those things that, like, when you tried it remotely or in a hybrid setting or even in a socially distant in-person setting, worked for students that you'll bring into your practice moving forward? So I'm going to stop talking for a couple minutes and turn it over to all of you in the chat to document some of your thinking. So what were those wins for you that you'll bring with you next year? And if you typed in something, thanks everybody. If you typed in something, maybe just share why, so other people can hear why you like love this tool and it works so well. Yeah, Google Classroom was a big leap and a good platform for so many people. One of the things that we found out at my school and across our network, I don't know if you guys had the same experience, but when we moved, parent meetings, PTA, parent teacher conferences, eighth grade assessment, right? Like in Chicago, we have to, students have to take tests prior to high school, and there's all this like stuff you have to go through. But when we were able to make our parent meetings on Zoom, we had significantly better attendance from families and more consistent attendance as well. You know, we think about it like, oh, all these parent meetings that we had at school, we asked families to come back at like 6 or 6:30. They're trying to like feed kids really quickly, get them back in the car, back to school to show up for an event. And so early on, we all decided that like, holy moly, we're going to use video conference for family meetings because it just makes so much sense. You can record it, people can watch it later, the information is there. And so like that was a big aha for us and for our families that we didn't expect. Yeah, like IEP meetings too, you know, like think how hard those are to schedule every year, but it makes it a little bit easier if people aren't trying to like drive and park and get to different places. Pear Deck, Adrian, yeah, I mean, just such an awesome way to like keep that engagement piece with students and to get data in a variety of different places. Christine, Nearpod too, right? Like everybody was just super excited about either Pear Deck or Nearpod as an opportunity. And of course, like Jamboard, right? The 9,000 uses of Jamboard in the classroom. I think those are all like those great examples of things where we're like, oh my gosh, like this is such a simple tool, but you can do so many different things with that. Digital agendas, right? Or like workflows. We did so much with workflows, even just on Google Slides, like, hey, everybody, welcome to math. Today, we're going to talk for a little bit, and then independently, you're going to go through the activities on these next couple of slides while I come around and work with small groups, right? Like that small group piece, I think was a huge piece of it. Yeah, and something to message parents, right? Whether you're connecting with parents through some of the Google tools or Class Dojo or Seesaw. Like that's something I think is like a win too, that families have more information than ever before, you know. And so like when we talk about parents and caregivers as partners, now we've made like huge strides to really engage them as so. And I think it's super powerful. You know, those like mini lesson videos too, right? Like I have so many mini lesson videos, even just on like tech setup. Like, hey everybody, so if you forgot how to post a video to Flipgrid, watch this short little 3-minute tutorial, right? So like all of those things that we're creating those scaffolds and supports that some students might need in order to be successful in our new learning conditions. Great thinking, everybody. I'm learning so much from you guys. Thank you very much for sharing in the chat, and keep doing that because like there's a ton of ideas that you guys have that I might not have thought of either. So those are great examples of things we're going to adopt into practice, right? When I look at a classroom setting where we're probably going to be in person and have more devices and access to digital than ever before, I'm really thinking about what endures. And when I think about what endures, I'm thinking about like, what are those tried and true practices that we employed prior to COVID, right? So like maybe a literacy workshop, maybe student engagement, maybe independent reading, inquiry circles, those things. That's one element. But then I think there are a lot of things from the pandemic that we can pull into what should endure. You know, like I hope after all this that we don't go back to maybe like that rigid class schedule. Like there was some flexibility in the pandemic. I think flexibility really supported a lot of students. Can we hold on to that? Right? Like we did some great modeling of our digital think alouds and skills in the pandemic. Can we hold on to like, are we doing that think aloud piece digitally too? And so I'm reflecting a lot on like what I want it to look like, cherry picking the best of the best from the before and the pandemic in order to create the next, right? So a couple of things that are mulling around in my brain. I think something that I'm going to adopt into my practice, and I think a lot of teachers are thinking about, but one example would be this marriage of print and digital literacy, right? Like for a long time, we were so vested in print, and like that still endures. Print's not going away. It's super important. And we have new access to digital literacy. So, how can we leverage all these things to really get students to a point where they're able to read, write, interact, think, and use information effectively? This is a video from my classroom several years ago. It's maybe about like 2.5 minutes long, but I wanted to show you what a possible marriage of that print and digital literacy lesson could look like. So this is an interactive read aloud in first grade. We are in a unit about polar animals. And so this is a content-based unit, but you're going to see a lot of literacy blended within. Students are on Edmodo, which is an LMS, just like Google Classroom or Schoology or Canvas, and they are doing digital note-taking on Edmodo. I have my classroom projector just projecting our classroom Edmodo page. So behind me, you'll see a screen and some of the thinking of students. But as you watch this video, I want you to notice the multimodal ways kids are interacting with the information, and maybe even just make a quick short list. And then I want you to also just notice engagement with students, okay? So take a look at this. It's just a couple short minutes.
Miles of new ice have formed along the shore, so they must walk even farther this time. I'm going to jot that farther. I know, I'm going to jot that down because I did not know that. Mothers have to walk farther. Eden writes, polar bears are not alike with penguins. Mothers walk farther, Jacob S. writes in there. Water is the penguin's true home. They can hold their breath for over 15 minutes and dive to a depth of 1,700 feet to feed on fish, krill, and squid. Wait a second. I remember someone asking, what do they eat? Do you hear that? Let me read that again.
That's what I said.
So I think you're going to have to jot this. This is your answer. To feed on fish, krill, and squid. Ben, did you hear about how far they dive down?
Wait, 1,700 feet.
Whoa, that is so deep. Hold on, Hannah. Let me jot my thinking, and I'll come right back to you. 1,700 feet
1,700.
deep. Whoa. And you know what? That piece of new learning actually gives me a question, too. How long can they hold their breath? I'm going to jot that down. How long can they...
15 minutes.
Did it say that?
No, it said over 15 minutes. Over? Read it again. It said over.
Here, you know what? Great recommendation. Read it again. Read it again, Dylan says. Bring it back to the book, okay? Water is the penguin's true home. They can hold their breath for over 15 minutes and dive to a depth of 1,700 feet to feed on fish, krill, and squid. Diego, you did something important. You told me 15 minutes, but I wasn't monitoring my comprehension very closely there. I said the words, I read the text, but it didn't click in my brain how long they could hold their breath. So what I did was I went back and reread. And now, right away, because I was reading with a question in mind, I saw 15 minutes. So I can actually post that answer right now. More than 15 minutes, maybe 16, maybe 17. So I'm going to
jot that down, is what I said as the next step right there. First grade, interacting. Hopefully you saw a couple of the different ways that they were engaging and thinking about that piece of text. So I was doing that interactive read aloud so they could listen to me read the words. They could view the images that were on that National Geographic book. They had the opportunity to type and to write in the Edmodo back channel. They could read the responses of their friends on Edmodo and comment. They also had a lot of opportunity to talk and build thinking off each other as they went. But when I look at something like this, and my intent in planning this was, it was just about like folding in one more modality for students to gain access, right? So like when we have multimodal learning like that, learning preferences are available, right? So if you're a writer, you're typing right on there. If you're a reader, you can be reading the responses, you can be listening to me. If you're a talker, like that turn and talk piece, we'd gotten to the point in the year where we're beyond hand raising, right? Like we're talking because it's relevant to learning, and we figured out how to share the air and to do that. And so not every lesson has to look like that, but it's an opportunity when we craft lessons and say, okay, what are all the entry points for kids to engage in this thinking? Then we welcome them to be the heavy lifters, right? Like Smokey Daniels always talks all the time about like the teachers are doing all the work and the heavy lifting in the classroom. When we create opportunities for kids to do the heavy lifting, then they're using the information and are able to remember it quite a bit more. That video is from our first book, Connecting Comprehension and Technology. And there's about 90 minutes in the video in that book if you're looking for more. So I think this piece of like, there's digital, there's print, we're doing it, you know, like that's something I hope we adopt that next step. I think we're also doing the same with the types of text we're putting in front of students, and then we're making them aware of these types of text. And so we're in a guided reading group reading Scary Snakes. And one of the students asked, how come snakes are always like labeled as like scary? And then someone else said, or slimy, or like slithery. And so we started having a conversation about like how snakes are getting a bad rap, right? And then another student who wasn't in that reading group, but who was eavesdropping said, like sharks, the same thing happens with sharks too, that they put all these scary pictures on the cover of like teeth and jaws. And then we talked about like, who's giving sharks and snakes this bad reputation? And so had the opportunity to bring about this bigger idea of media messages and media literacy in the classroom. But then one of the other students suggested we go into Epic and look at all the snake books and look at all the shark books to test our theories, right? And then of course it became, let's look at all the books in the classroom and all the books on Epic. But here we're able to notate and start identifying parallels and differences between print and digital informational text as well. So this shark thing became a big piece for us. We then started to do some research and again looked at how do we blend our print literacy of reading with some of the new literacies. And the new literacy in this example is infographics, right? Like how are we using infographics in the classroom? Are we teaching them? Like, have we given kids access to them? Because I think many times infographics are misinterpreted as easy to read because they're pictorial in nature. But when we look at them, they're all typically math and science data sets and have a lot of information to unpack in every single nugget, right? So if you look at this one, like look how much information is on a page. We're again going back to that idea of refuting like media messages, right? There are an average of 4 fatal shark attacks worldwide each year on humans, yet humans kill 100 million sharks a year, right? So we're like starting to like disrupt our thinking a little bit and go beyond what the information we're presented with says and really get to the heart of some serious issues. So infographics are something I hope we're adopting moving forward. And then once we learn how to read infographics and start understanding the components of it, we then move into that next piece and invite students to represent information graphically. How do you create an infographic? Because I think when we create something, that allows us to really know it at a very deep level and to understand it. And so this was one of the infographics created by an 8th grader at my school prior to the pandemic. And they did a survey of 200 some students in 7th and 8th grade and what they thought about cell phones in the classroom. And so here are their findings, as well as how they pulled it together to create a cohesive message using one page. This was just done on a Google slide, right? So like, again, layering in some of those digital elements we've been using into one Google slide to communicate a powerful message. When we think about adapting things, right? So like now I'm blending print and digital. Now we're bringing in infographics. I think something I want to adapt is the idea of podcasts, and then also pairing that with sketchnoting. We did a lot of podcasts this year, and what it confirmed for me is that we need additional work on listening comprehension with students, right? When you're getting your information auditorily, what's happening in your brain? How are you organizing that and synthesizing the information? For us this year, podcasts were a great way for students to gain information auditorily. And then we started the sketchnoting process because there's tons of research out now on nonlinear note-taking and how nonlinear note-taking is a more effective way of organizing information than just like writing across the page of a notebook. And so we taught kids how to do this, and we're looking at their representations and holding on to this moving forward. Towards the end of the year, we even started in many grades having kids start to create their own podcasts. And what goes into a podcast? Where does the information come from? How do you write it out beforehand or create an outline to plan what you're about to share? And so lots of great things can come from this balance of some of the digital with a traditional storytelling format. And so those are a few things I'm going to adapt, right? Like, yes, I tried it this year, but I'm going to refine it a little bit for my students or for my school need because it was good, but I can make it a little bit better. So again, I'm going to turn it back to you. What is something that you tried and you're like, ooh, this is almost just right. I just need to tweak it a little bit. And then it will be like a rooted part of my classroom practice. So head back to the chat and jot some of your thinking. What are those elements that you're going to adapt? Awesome. So many great ideas here. Storyboarding, I love that. Like that is something like, yes, like we can organize information in so many different ways, right? And like we should be creating opportunities for kids to try a couple of different ways and then identify the way that works really well for them, right? Like that step-by-step process. Videos, right? Like almost like a flipped classroom, or I like to do it all the time where I'm like multiplying myself as a teacher teacher, right? Like I'm meeting with the small group and another small group is watching a video of me doing like the next set of instruction or learning out there. I think like one of the things that I'm gonna adjust is just like keep doing the digital reading lessons. Like I think we need more on the why, at least my students do, as we head back to school as well, using the tech for feedback, right? Like how easy is it just to give feedback on Google Classroom or even something like Seesaw where you could like speak your feedback to students. And I was able to find that like I'm able to give better feedback and more of it because I can type way faster than I can like handwrite on a sticky note, right? And I can speak faster than I can do either of those things. And so like that's exciting for me, that I can communicate even better with students. Great job. Good ideas, you guys. This is really awesome to hear what worked and like what you're thinking about some of those next pieces of practice. So when we think about what we're going to just immediately adopt, how we're going to adapt some things. And then I think, that what's next piece, here are some of the things that I'm seeing in that what's next piece, right? Like, where do I think we need to go to meet the needs of all of our learners? And I think what's next, we're going to see a lot of small groups, or maybe we need to see a lot of small groups. We know that chances are our students are going to be coming in with a wide range of skills and abilities. And that's okay. Like we've always had the continuum of learners walk into our classrooms before, but I think that will signal that instead of teaching the lesson to the whole group, much of our instruction has to happen in that small group setting. And so just similar to, I can't remember if someone put in the chat about the videos, right? Maybe there's a small group in this first circle here watching a video of some strategy or lesson, right? In an ELA classroom, maybe there's some kids doing independent reading, or in science, maybe there's a research group. Then there'll probably be a small group meeting with the teacher, and that's where the heavy hitting of instruction comes, right? In those small groups, so I can adapt and adopt it to what my kids need. I can personalize and differentiate in the small group setting, right? Other students may be synthesizing their learning on a tool like Flipgrid or making a video. And then maybe there's a collaboration group where kids are talking about strategies or doing some group work together. But I think small group is going to be where it's at, so that we're not just teaching to the middle, we're adjusting whichever way kids need us to. Right? So I think small group instruction is going to be a key component for us to hang our hat on next year. I said this just a couple of seconds ago, but I think instruction in the digital is going to be something that we have to cycle back to, because I think in many instances, because we were remote or because we were doing more online or there was hybrid, we were asking kids to do things digitally without having taught them how or why. Right? Like so many times I think we said like, go to National Geographic and read the article on giraffes, but we hadn't done some mini lessons in informational text reading on a device, right? And so like my feelers are really cued into not make assumptions, right? I can't assume just because we did it that they know how to do it strategically. And so I'm really looking for those opportunities to identify digital mini lessons that kids will need so that they can access a wide variety of content in the work that we're going to do next year. Maybe some of them already have it, but I think it reminds me, and I've had these interactions in like the last couple of months with students too. You know how like elementary teachers, you might have encountered like a second or third grader that was like, oh, I finished Harry Potter. And we're like, okay, we know that you like read the words, but you probably didn't understand the message or the themes or all the layers that went into it. And I think maybe sometimes with some of the digital reading we've done, you know, like kids have read it, but they haven't deeply comprehended it. And that's like that's the moment where I'm looking for the opportunities of, let's go back and talk about this. You know how you know, when you're flipping a page on a Kindle, you flip it, right? On a Chromebook, you have to click it, you know, like all of these different things. Obviously, kids probably have that one, but like there's so many more strategic comprehension things I think we can teach them so that they feel successful in a variety of formats. Oh, and then just I think like modeling it, right? Like I modeled print reading for all these years of my teaching career. Where can I find new opportunities to model device reading, right? And like I was able to do that some during remote learning, but it's something that I need to focus on even more moving forward. The why behind that is because it's so complex, right? Like we think of it just like on screen or digital reading, but what we now know is that when you're reading digitally, it varies by format, right? So that middle column right there, ebooks, PDFs, e-textbooks, multi-touch books, EPUBs, blogs, social media, the format of what you're reading has its own reading strategies, right? So like all of these have different interaction points. Then we multiply that by devices, right? So reading digitally on my phone is different than reading digitally on my laptop, right? Which would be different than reading digitally. My laptop's different than a Chromebook, right? So if I start to think about, okay, have I taught kids how to read a PDF on their Chromebook? Yes. Have I taught kids how to read a PDF on their smartphone? Like, especially for my friends that are teaching middle school, high school, beyond, so much of what learners are doing are on these devices. And I think this is where we haven't modeled it. You know, like, have you ever tried to make Google Slides on a phone? That is a very different experience than making them on your laptop. But we know kids are doing this, right? So like, are there opportunities in the classroom to share, you know, like what your phone screen looks like, pop it under a document camera, mirror it to an Apple TV or whatever, Chromecast, and just show, okay, just so you know, like the layout's different for Google Slides, right? You have to look for the little hidden sidebar to add things. So we're thinking about that. Then we think about like, okay, so now we've modeled how to read a multi-touch book like Epic, right? We've done that on a Chromebook. Have we done it on an iPad? Have we done it on a smartphone so that kids are accessing? So there are a lot of opportunities for us to go deeper when we talk about digital reading, right? And like I just said before too, like we've always just like umbrellaed it all as device reading or on-screen reading. When we stop and think about how we organize our strategies for paper reading, right? Different genres, every genre has a myriad of strategies and comprehension elements that we employ in order to understand what's happening in that text. It only makes sense that when we're thinking about the formats that we're reading on device, that they also have independent strategies that we employ. Sometimes those strategies overlap. Sometimes there'll be nuanced things that we need to point out for kids and give them then with all of this time to build fluency. You know, like how much time have we allowed previously for device reading, right? Like where can we find opportunities just to pull up the bar for everybody? And I think so much of this goes back to Anne Magnan's work, who she's my favorite researcher out of Norway, who's really looking into the influences and changes of digital. And her research has led her to this idea that digital reading is so multi-layered and complex that we need to teach it in every subject, not just ELA, right? Because like science content reading is a genre of itself. Then we add the digital, then we add the format and the device piece. It only makes sense that we have to be teaching this across the course of the day. So I think those are some pushes for me as we think about those next steps. My book, Read the World, has tons of lessons on some of these next steps and where to go with students. I've posted a couple of the lessons on that website for you to access. So there's some handouts, there's some think sheets that you can use with kids, as well as the entire lesson context as you're thinking about some of these key pieces of what's next. And so as we go back, it's going to be that kind of like utopia in my mind of, yes, we're going to do like all the awesome things, the this we believes that we did prior to the pandemic. And now that we have more devices or more access maybe to devices for students, we can say, and we can read digitally, which is a win for kids, right? We can create videos, which is a win for kids. Kids can create videos to teach other kids. Like all of these additional elements we add to the pool that allow kids to gain access to information, that allow them to personalize how they access the information, personalize their delivery, share with beyond school audiences, capture like right in the moment snapshots of thinking, and so many more ways. So I'm a huge fan of the opportunity, right? And I think we have a tremendous opportunity, and I hope we leverage that moving forward. I'm just going to scoot up here a little bit because I want to give you a little bit of time to do this. So I think like what it comes down to is like we're at this place right now where I want us to reflect and to know that what we're using with students digitally and what we're doing in the classroom has merit and value. And how do we know? And I think like if I was going to push a little bit, my push would be, well, beyond kids are engaged or beyond kids like it, like how do we know that this really has an impact on learning, right? And so this is a question that we're asking ourselves and that we're thinking about in the next, weeks and months before we return to full instruction. And this is who we are. We're learners, right? Like teachers never stop learning. Part of us being a learner is that we're a reflective practitioner. And I totally get, I said yesterday, if you need to sleep for 10 days, or if you need to read some like beach books or like Us magazine, or like have a brain dump and just be like, whoa, back away from the vehicle for a little bit. But then we do always get back to that reflective point at some moment. And when we reflect and start to think about some of these elements, I think there's a couple of key questions that we ask. And, here's a snapshot of my reflection, right? So when I think about what went well this year and something that I'm going to adapt right into every practice that I do, I'm going to just take that piece, adopt into every practice I do, seesaw, right? And seesaw is something we use this year, pre-K through 8th grade. We used it with 8th graders because there's no better tool for making something quickly. Whether it be a video, a sketch, a drawing, an infographic. If you need to create and show something, show your math thinking, Seesaw is a great tool for all ages. I'm encouraging everyone to adopt Seesaw just right out of the gate because it's so easy. It creates that built-in portfolio and archive. It gives us lots of snapshots of student work and the ease of feedback and assessment. All you have to do is open your laptop, boom, it's all right there, right? So yes, this is a win. Something that I'm going to adapt or tweak a little bit moving forward is independent reading time. And now with access to the ebook libraries, Epic, Reading A to Z, Libby Library app, now I'm really going to make that effort to have independent reading time that blend, right? Like I want kids reading in print, I want kids reading on device, and I want to give them lots of time to build fluency in both of those areas. How I'm going to know that these tools work, right? And this is where I really had to do some thinking. I know that something like Seesaw works because you can watch students gain independence, and it gives them those multimodal options that we've talked about, right? More examples of student thinking allows me to understand students better, and in response, identify what I need to teach them next, right? So like, this is my evidence for why Seesaw is a good tool for my students. When I think about what I'm going to adapt with digital text, I think that like, I know that kids have shown a lot of times over the course of the year that they need more time with digital. We've done great work with print reading, and we've laid the foundation for strong comprehension, but I know that they're going to need more time with this and have those mini lessons, opportunities to demonstrate comprehension, to document, whether it be in think sheets, 2-column charts, sketch notes, whatever. But I know that this is something that my students are going to need a little bit more of. So I'm really looking for the why, like beyond that student engagement piece. How do I know that kids are really learning from some of these tools that we have? And so if you could just take a moment, you guys have had so many awesome ideas today, but if you could just take a moment to do a little thinking in the chat and a little response. What is one thing that you say, I know this worked for my learners because, right? This is a tool for my grade, my subject, my age students, and here's the evidence that I have. And it might just be, like one thing that you're thinking of right now. And it might be, sometimes I'm like, whoa, I did a lot of things, but like, did I push to the, like, how do I know behind that? Like, what's my evidence behind it? And that's okay. Like, this is what the summer's for and what this reflection time is for. All of this thinking doesn't happen in one day. And sometimes it comes on the coattails of conversations with colleagues, but it's that part of getting the ball started and saying like, okay, what was one thing that is a definite game changer for kids, and how will I use this? Yep. I think totally, Miranda, like access to students that might have some reading need or might need some adaptation. That was one of the things. I did a lot of work with Chicago Public School Office of Special Education and Services, and just the opportunity for digital to make things more inclusive for kids, whether it be access to print or being part of a small group on Zoom, or collaborating together on some of those things. I think the equity and access piece, once we have devices and once we do have internet, really can scale where kids have the opportunity to feel fully connected and included for students. Organization, yep. With Google Classroom, helping kids figure out how to manage some of those pieces, I think is a big piece of the puzzle. One of the things that, yeah, Anna, sorry, I'm just reading what you wrote here, the flexibility, right? Like, how can we not only model compassion for students, but real world in some ways that, we have flexibility with when assignments are due, how you can revise and refinish it, or give it another go. You don't have to choose to, but for some students, that's a real affordance, right? And I think like along those lines too, I've thought a lot about the idea of make something, right? And like less of me saying things like make an iMovie to summarize and synthesize what happened and number the stars, right? But instead saying to students, make something to show me that you understand the book, number the stars, right? And so we can oftentimes get windows into things that we might have not asked them, right? We can see those personal touches of students. I just had a student recently that made a series of memes to explain Midsummer Night's Dream. And they had 8 different memes about key events from the text that clearly showcased that they got and comprehended the product, but they used a media form that they see every day, right, in their online interactions, and made it to a really high level. So I think sometimes variability in process and product for kids, right, is a big next step. One of the things that I put for you on the website is just access to your own copy of Doing and Knowing, right? So, like, if this is something that you want to be thinking about on your own, or maybe have a conversation with colleagues about, you can click the link on the website and just get this little think sheet. What are those pieces that you're going to adopt right away? What are you going to adapt? And then how do you know, right, that these are impactful for your learners? And I think, it's a good exercise, because one of the things we talked a lot about during this last year is like, we can't do everything, right? Like, there's so much out there, we can't do everything. And now we actually have permission to go back and say, okay, let's refine this. Let's synthesize all the things that we've been doing. And then let's really hang our hat on like 6 or 7 high yield processes that we know impact learning for our kiddos. So lots to think about. But I'm also so excited, like, I wish that we didn't have a global pandemic. I am so disheartened for the struggles that people have encountered in the last year and continue to encounter worldwide. But I think because we've had to struggle through that, there has to be something positive that comes out of this. And I'm hopeful that some of the new ways that we've identified student needs, differentiated for learning, personalized for kids, and given access will be one of those silver lining pieces. Thoughts, questions, wonderings? You can unmute, you can drop into the chat. Awesome, Janet. That sounds like a super fun project. And I think like those projects like endure, right? Like, we still need kids to be creating and making physical art. They can make digital art, right? We could take the physical art, take a video or a snapshot of it, post it online, and then we increase the audience that gets access to that art, and we say like, oh, we had this amazing gallery in the hallway at school. If you'd like to learn more, check us out online, on a blog, on a website, and then we increase, like, parents can see it all and kids can leave feedback to each other. And so I think one of the beautiful things is that the learning that kids do, or the work that they do in school, can live in the real world really easily via a Google site or a blog, or even just an Instagram page. The PE teacher at my school started making just like 1-minute little like workout routines on an Instagram page for the school. And like, now kids and family can go to the Instagram page and do like the little workout routine. And he'll be like, do this 4 times with your family at home for your body breaks today, but like bringing what we're doing in school, like, into the world, and then increasing access, is something that's kind of exciting, or even just something to think about. I feel like when I was thinking about, like, what's next, and I shared a little bit yesterday how, like, obviously this pandemic will stay with us and it will change us and it changes our students. And I think about my grandpa, talking about the Depression all the time, and how his everything that happened after the Depression was so firmly rooted in the Depression because it was such a monumental experience. I wonder if it will be the same with COVID and with our pandemic year of teaching and learning for our students. But I think that, we know change has happened, right? And I came across this piece that I think just really sums it up for us, that like, because of change, learning has changed, right? Like our lives have changed, so have how we learned. And now to become literate, to expand access to information, we have different ways to communicate. And even as we've seen across the course of the last year, we have different ways to take action right now. And so that's sort of where we were. Because of change, what we do has changed, and literacy has changed, and access to information has changed. So if we can keep this on the front of our brains as we're going into this reflection time, I think we'll be ready to go with some really thoughtful outcomes with students. And so my charge to all of you as we wrap up our time together is, what will you do next? Maybe you have 2 or 3 ideas right now. Maybe you have 6 ideas. Maybe you're like, ooh, I need some time to think about this because I was just like doing a lot. Like we're all doing something, but now I need to go back and really think about some of those what's next pieces. So as we wrap our time together today, be thinking about that's what's next. Where will your role play out in this world, and how can we really create conditions that are just as rich and robust and deep and accessible for students as possible? And if we do that, great things will follow. So I'm happy to stick around for questions if you guys have them, and always feel free, I'll drop my email in the chat, but feel free to reach out with any follow-up questions you have today too.
Kristen, thank you so much. I think what's so inspiring is that you are a teacher. You know what I mean? It's one thing. I mean, I think as educators, we can learn from all sorts of people, but there's just something about hearing a fellow teacher talk about their work and the way it's playing out in their classrooms with their students. So we're just so appreciative of you spending some time with us. Brooke, I think you have some information about our survey and certificate.
I do. And yes, thanks, Kristen. I always enjoy your sessions and take something away that I continue to use. So thank you. Thank you all for being here and attending this Virtual Summer Institute session. A recording of the session will be posted to the website soon. Please take our 1-minute survey, and this survey will allow us to reflect on your thoughts about the session. We're always looking for ways to improve, and it will allow you to receive a certificate of attendance for the session. So at this time, I think John is dropping the evaluation certificate request link in the chat. And I'll just hand it back over to Kristen for any concluding thoughts. And thanks again for being here.
Awesome. Thanks, Brooke. I also wish you time of reflection, but also time to rest. I think we all need that rest time this summer. And if we're going to be effective and efficient for our kids in the coming year, we do need a little bit of downtime. So parcel out your summer so that you have time for reflection, but also that you have time for that rest piece. It is so great to be with you guys. I look forward to connecting again and hope that we will get some real life time together in the coming year as things start to change. So thanks, everybody. Have a great rest of your day. And thanks for joining me this morning.